We're the book friends that think good.
What does this mean for our life, for our world? Yiggity yeet, my dude. I'm happy to speak. Always happy to think.
I don't know how to do that. I can look into that.
Makes you sound like a book friend that can think good.
It's Jack and it's Weston.
BFTTGs. Yeah.
Jack, I think good. Sometimes I good think, too.
Makes you sound pretty good.
We might want to make it more concise. We are going to attempt to grapple and answer 3 questions. Number 1, what did we learn? Number 2, what did we disagree with? And number 3, what are we going to do about it? I am ready to roll.
I'm in it. Weston, my book friend, tell me, what book is it that we're thinking good about today?
Today, we're talking about Chapter 6 in Field Guide to Lies and Statistics. And Probabilities. So, Jack, run us through the subtitles.
Okay, I probably will. He talks about probability and the different types of probability in this. And he also talks about how without probability we can become seduced by anecdotes and stories, and how probabilities are a safeguard against those things because they give us statistical handles, but they also can be dubious. So what he talks about is like different ways that probabilities, of course, can be manipulated. And here are some of the ones that he mentions. He talks about combining probabilities. He talks about when the probability of events is informed by other events. He talks about conditional probabilities. And that actually he talks about visualizing conditional probabilities, medical decision making, which is just an example of conditional probability being applied in a visualized way. And then he talks about thinking about statistics and graphs and why that's important. Interesting section of the book, because I feel like this section of the book was much more educational than other sections. Like
I would agree with that.
He gets a lot into it. Read kind of like a textbook in the section where he talks about visualizing probabilities, because he introduces a concept with this like 4x4 grid, this like 2x2 column row chart. Punnett square.
That's it.
Yeah, from genetics.
It's a Punnett square. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's a Punnett square. It really is. But I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, he gets into like explaining how probabilities work, how they're calculated, some nomenclature with probabilities. I think rightly understanding that like we're not taught all that much about probability, really. I don't know. At least I found that section. I was like, interesting. I did go over some of this in college statistics, but I don't remember talking about this at all in high school, which is something he mentioned. Like, we should all be taught this in high school.
I mean, I agree we should, but I don't know. Because when I took statistics in high school, we never got to like conditional probabilities or anything.
Yeah.
Like, we never got to like statistics that were layered. We basically only... granted, it's, intro to statistics, but what is his name for them? Just classic, right? Just classic probability is basically how we talked about in my statistic class in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had a learning at page 101, which is pretty early in the chapter. Did you?
Cool. No, go for it.
Again, kind of a reminder, like a connection more than a learning. But in some of those spreadsheets, if you saw them, my Pokemon spreadsheets, if you saw them in the previous books videos, I forget which episode they're in, but I've created a conditional probability calculator basically on my Pokemon decks based off all these other statistics that I've taken, and it's a win prediction model. So if I put 2 decks in there, it'll tell me this deck has a 66% chance to win or whatever. And it just maybe I was like, that's a subjective probability when I was reading that section.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Well, because he talks about that as Bayesian probability.
What I wanted to do. Well, yes. But what I wanted to do was then try and figure out a way I could like meta analyze it and then find its margin of error. Like I would have to go back and see how many times it was right and how many times it was wrong.
Yeah.
And then I could even add that to a layer in it.
Yeah. He actually got into that
chapter where we were talking about thinking about things, being too busy thinking about whether you could do it or whether you should do it.
Yeah. I think you should. You should definitely analyze the p-value on that bad boy.
Oh, dude.
What's your confidence interval? That actually was in the last chapter and we didn't talk about it at all, but he talks about like confidence interval and p-value and like margin of error.
Yeah.
And I think that like sometimes I come across this stuff in math and I think, is this made to confuse us? Do they do this just to make things confusing? Like it makes sense. You can logic it, you can math it, but also why? Why the confidence?
That's the fun part, dude.
Yeah.
It's like when people, because that I feel like that's another answer again, going back to last chapter. When people don't respond correctly or respond as like trolls or whatever in reporting biases.
Yeah.
Part of it's just because you can't, right?
Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. I had another learning similar to your learning from the last chapter, linguistically, when on page 108, he says, we can home in on a better estimate if we know something about that particular person.
Dude, I highlighted that too. And I am like willing to bet he's wrong.
I Googled it.
Is he right?
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
It is home is better is what the first thing on Google said.
Home is better than hone in?
But hone is correct. So it's one of those cases where you can say it either way. Because homing is like it's talking about homing like pigeons or like missiles, I guess. So they can.
I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense too.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's hilarious that we both highlighted that. Yeah, careful reading, folks. Find out what you have been saying wrong your whole life.
Yeah.
Man.
I had something else on 108. Just like, kind of that section right before 108 where putting the probability of a waiter bringing you ketchup given that you just ordered a hamburger and you asked for ketchup, putting that in the like logical symbolism. And that I had another flood of memories back to some logic classes in college. And it like made me want to go find some logic puzzles that are, because you can do them just like math equations.
Yeah.
A lot of times, or at least with the simpler ones. And like, I just had fun doing that. And I was like, I should just go find.
Yeah.
Maybe want to just go do logic puzzles.
Ooh, a puzzle.
Ooh.
I liked some of the like simple examples he gave, like the one where he talks about blood tests and he's like, oh, there's like a 0.00064% chance that your blood would match the blood at this crime scene, right? If you're innocent. Yeah. But if you're guilty, it's 100% sure that blood will match.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty funny, where it's like, oh yeah, like it's just one of those examples where like probabilities can be so dubious.
Well, and they can just be confusing. Like I remember I was looking at what page was it on? I think it's the one on page 114 where he's talking about the breast cancer test.
Oh man, I read that like 5 times.
Okay,
and I was like,
so did I. I was like, wait a second. Wait, what?
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna have to do this on a napkin because
yeah. Even looking at his Punnett square, I was like, no, wait. Yeah, I was like, I got way too confused at that, dude. I mean, it makes sense once you like understand it.
Well, and it's one of those things where it's like, just because you can put something in a simple illustration doesn't mean it's easy to understand.
Yes.
Like it kind of illustrates his point that he's trying to make when we talked about graphs, how like you can get away with funky stuff when you visualize stuff, but like even looking at it, I'm like, oh man, it takes a bit for my brain to parse it. Yeah. Again, it's just the large numbers. Yeah. You see them and he makes a really good point here in this chapter where he says, many of us feel intimidated by numbers. This is on page 119. So I'm getting to the end of the chapter, but he says, many of us feel intimidated by numbers. So we blindly accept the numbers we're handed. This can lead to bad decisions and faulty conclusions. We also have a tendency to apply critical thinking only to things we disagree with. I thought that those were both really interesting points. One, that people are intimidated, and so they just blindly accept stuff. It's really easy to see how you could do that with some of these probabilities.
Yeah.
But then also that we have a tendency only to apply critical thinking to things we disagree with makes sense too. Like a really good example is like he made the case that like this surgeon was saying that 93% of breast cancers occurred in women who were in a high risk group. But still, if you're in that group, your percentage of actually having breast cancer is like in the single digits. It's like 7%.
Yeah.
But I would be inclined to trust a surgeon. So like if he throws out a number and is wearing a white coat, you're like, oh, okay. I'm not going to think too hard about that.
You know why I think this example was so confusing? To me, at least, I kept reading it as like, these are the numbers that if you're in the doctor's office and you've already done the test, they're going to tell you this. But it's like, dude, if you've gotten to that point, you're not in the population of only 0.08% of the population. You know what I mean? Like I feel like this has an error in the example in terms of it's assuming that just everyone's gonna be concerned and get a breast cancer test. And that's just not the case. You're not going in there to get that test unless there's a lump there, unless there's like something that you're feeling that's off, right?
Yeah.
So that's why, but again, I think he's looking at the overall, and it's just like that's why it's not. Maybe that's why, because there's so many premises or like stages or steps that you would have gone through to even get the test taken.
Yeah.
That like you're not thinking of yourself as in the totalitarian of the population. You've already self-identified yourself as like, I'm in this subset of people that have this thing, wrong, or have enough symptoms that would cause me to come up here and get it checked out by you, a professional.
Yeah.
But
again,
I don't think that the author here, that Levitin's trying to say that doctors would say this number. So I think that's where I was getting confused, where I was just like, wait, a doctor's not going to like say that number to you for the whole population when you're already in there.
Right. Yeah. Like what's the actual application?
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things that's really interesting about this is there's so many non-obvious variables or non-obvious like categories that are pulled to calculate these statistics.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, if we just pull somebody off the street and test them for breast cancer, like, but that's not something you would ever do.
Right.
So like it kind of like loses its basis in reality, which is, are you ready for this? I have my first real pushback of the book.
Let's go.
Yeah. First, on the very first page of the chapter, when he says, probabilities allow us to quantify future events and are an important aid to rational decision making. Without them, we can become seduced by anecdotes and stories. This is true, but I think I have a really strong caveat with this, just looking at the numbers and like looking at like the examples that he gives. That's like, we could be seduced by anecdotes and stories, but we could also be seduced by probabilities improperly gathered and used and calculated. I don't think that like properly calculated statistics are a panacea. Like just if you know, it's like the whole, like, if you know the good, you will do the good.
Yeah.
Like knowing how probabilities work better is not the salve to this. Like, and it also doesn't discount all anecdotes and stories as a method of knowing.
Well, I mean, there's also
right?
the whole idea that people like to gamble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Knowing the odds might make me go for something because I know it's low odds, right? I'm not going to always pick the one that might happen. There's a lot of things that we go into life where it's like, I know this might not happen, but worth it. And you just, right? So
yeah. Well, it's also like too. just because something is likely or unlikely doesn't also make it true.
Yes.
Like here's a big pushback for me is that like, I sometimes think that like what he would say is the solution to this stuff is like, you need to get better about your thinking and like be more critical or be more math mathematically minded or trained. I think that like my solution to it is actually the opposite, which is like sometimes you need to trust your gut, because like even the most like probable things are not going to, like, intuition is a powerful source of knowing, I would say. And I think that like sometimes anecdote like doesn't care about statistics and can be reliable. Like you hear something like, like take cancer, for instance, where it says like, statistically speaking, mammograms are usually right according to the numbers in this book, in this chapter. But someone could tell you like, oh yeah, my aunt had a mammogram, showed positive. She thought she had cancer and she really didn't, which is a possibility. It's not a very likely possibility, but it is possible. And that could give somebody hope, and it could be true. And that doesn't mean that like it's not useful. Like that's not useful data, or that's not something that is like worthwhile to believe just because it's unlikely.
Well, there's also the
I don't know.
With that kind of thing in particular, there's the power of positivity,
right?
Like there's, well, I don't know, because I don't know the numbers or anything on it, but it's just like, I've read about people that, and granted, it's been mostly older people after you lose your spouse of 50 plus years or whatever. It's like they just lose their will to live, dude. Right. And they'll just die. And I don't know. So hope is a very powerful thing, and having something to look forward to is a very powerful thing, or having a hope and even the slightest chance.
Yeah. Well, and if you live your life by statistics, like nothing extraordinary will ever happen.
Exactly.
Which is not true.
I mean, have they not seen Along Came Polly, dude?
You need to watch Miracle on Ice, man. They shocked the world. Also, Polly did come along.
Yeah. I said this is kind of a learning too, because I hadn't thought about like the definition of conditional probability. But I definitely said like conditional probabilities are like my favorite probabilities to use in like jokes and to think about. I find myself often adding conditional probabilities just for fun, hypothetically, to things. Like
what?
I don't know. I should have written.
Can you think of an example?
Down, yeah, I should have written an example down. But like, what if I had?
Okay.
Well, there's a conditional probability joke right there.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like,
I feel like that's like when you're like in a group of guys and then you keep adding onto it, like that's like conditional probabilities, right? Oh, and then she falls into the tub.
Yeah.
And then what if her clothes fall off?
WKUK,
that's
right
why
there.
Kids,
That's funny.
I don't know. I'll probably cut that part.
Okay. We'll yeah. No, I mean all that like adding on is great. Yeah, I think it was funny how he just like dunks on Bayesian probability.
Oh yeah,
I love that. He says that was another. Well, I actually push back against it, because it's like, yes, like the weather is not reliable or whatever, but like it's still. I feel like it's just as legitimate a statistic as like the blood sample thing, where it's like, okay, yeah, that's a useful statistic if you're innocent, but if the guy is guilty, that means nothing. Like that's actually extremely harmful. But like, yeah, like looking at past performance and like current performance, the Royals have an 80% chance of winning their next game. He says, like, he makes the quote on page 101. He might well have crunched the numbers or used a computer to inform this estimate, but at the end of the day, the number is just a guess, an indication of his degree of confidence in his prediction. And I think like, given the nature of collection of data, and like based on some of my cynicism from the last chapter, I'm kind of thinking like, isn't the other number just a guess too? Even if it's like, make it as objective as you want, like you're always going to have that element that like is kind of a guess.
I mean, yeah. I'm kind of
like,
confused
take
what
something.
Your pushback is though. What's your pushback against that? Because I feel like that's what he's saying.
I just that I feel like my pushback isn't against the statement. It's against like how hard he goes in on Bayesian probability. Maybe it's just like me interpreting tone incorrectly.
Read the section you're talking about then.
It's on 100 and 101. Where he's talking about TV weather reporters. He talks about that at the beginning of page 100, but goes on with sports, and that was the conclusion of it that I just read. But like one of the examples they says is like when a TV weather reporter says there's a 30% chance of rain tomorrow, she didn't conduct experiments on a bunch of identical days with identical conditions and then count the outcomes. The 30% number expresses her degree of belief that it will rain and is meant to inform you about whether you want to go to the trouble of grabbing your galoshes or umbrella. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just overdressing his like treatment of it, but it just sounded like he was basically saying like, probabilities are reliable except for Bayesian probability, which is not reliable.
I think he's just making the argument that it's used for a different thing, but then used interchangeably. Like it's useful as a confidence measure, but I think he's more saying like it needs to, like, you know, just like a lot of the statistics that we've talked about, it's like it gets applied in bad contexts or misapplied in
easily
inappropriate contexts. You know?
Yep. Let's see. Did you have any pushback in the chapter?
Nope.
Did you have any? What did you think of in terms of learnings, or not learnings, but what you want to do from this chapter on probabilities?
I think I want to include some more conditional probability statistics in like some of my videos. Like in some of my Pokemon videos, like before a turn happens, like here's the conditional probability that I win based off this, right? Because I've done that just colloquially with you, where I've been like, I've texted Jack and been like, dude, I had a 98% chance of winning this battle on this turn, and I lost. You know, So like I should show more of those conditional probabilities because they're easier to measure in Pokemon, where it's a game like I know this move has a 90% chance to hit. I know that his move has a 90% chance to do this or whatever, or 30% chance, right? So it's pretty clear cut conditional probabilities. So that's why I feel like it's feasible. But I feel like that'd be a fun. What I'm trying to say is I haven't seen other Pokemon YouTubers do that. So that'd be something that I could do that'd be a little unique.
I think that's awesome. You should definitely do that. Use probability as much as possible in your everyday life. Well reasoned. That would be, I mean, just a great skill. I wonder if actuaries are like that. Like, you know, if you step off that curb that way, you have a 4% chance of dying.
Well, I mean, that's like Along Came Polly again, right? Ben Stiller's character says that stuff all throughout the book.
Oh yeah, that's true. Man, this chapter should be titled "Along Came Polly."
Yeah, chocolate.
Yeah, that's it.
Rain Man,
let it rain.
It's a great scene.
Yeah, it is.
Dude, we got to get out of here. Dude.
Yeah,
we got to get out of here.
Yep. Exactly. that
movie defined sharding, dude.
I think it did. Yeah, it did.
Because they goes, what is sharding? He's like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Man. Okay, here's my takeaway.
Yeah, what are you gonna do about it?
Here's what I'll say. This chapter, we've been reading a lot of Field Guide of Lies and Statistics, but this chapter made me think I need to brush up on my statistics. Like it actually inspired me to say, like, maybe I should take an Udemy course or like Coursera course on statistics, and just like, because I was looking at this chart and like I was so confused by it that I was like, I need to run this back. I need to do some probability exercises.
I mean, dude, I had the same experience. I was like, hold up a second, bro.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. That actually is something like this book has been getting me more interested in statistics, and like it's just been so long since I've, actively applied myself to them. It's something I'm strongly considering after reading this chapter.
Yeah.
But more like practically, like immediate, I really like this one line that he has on 119 where he says, bad statistics are everywhere. As sociologist Joel Best says, it's not just because the other guys are all lying weasels. Bad statistics are produced by people, often sincere, well-meaning people who aren't thinking critically about what they're saying. So I think like I really like that framework because it's non-judgmental, right? It's not saying like these people are rats. It's like it's saying like statistics are just done poorly. Just strengthens that position for me, but also makes me want to like arm myself with better statistical knowledge, I guess.
Yeah. No, I felt the same impetus.
Yeah, so if I find a good free statistics course, I'll put it in the
We'll link it in the show description. Notes. If it's not there, sorry, we couldn't find one.
Yeah, or we just didn't do it.
I don't know. What's the possibility? What's the
We're thinking good, not great. Yeah, the probability they'll do that is about 50-50.
I think that's highly conditional.
Another baseless statistic from your book friends. Watch out there.
Watch out. Y'all want to hear some stats? All right.
Go check it.
This video is 90% intelligence. 30%.
You're 40%
brains,
likely to watch another one of these right now.
10% reason to remember the name BFTTG.
Thank you for joining us, book friends. Next week on the BFTTG pod, Jack and Weston, they're thinking good some more with you, our book friends. Check out the show notes or the description, comment section for a link to the book and any articles that we talk about in the show. Bye-bye, book friends.
Bye for this time, guys.
Do a good thing today.
I love you.
Love you too, dude.